Hi, this is Charles Hoskinson broadcasting live late at night from Toronto, Ontario. I'm here in town for the BRI's annual summit. I was invited to speak, and I'll be speaking tomorrow. But as many of you notice, there's a lot of stuff going on right now in the markets, and everything's kind of a unique place. And so I figured I'd make a video before I went to bed, even though it's quite late here. It's almost 1 o'clock in the morning. It's about 12:30 of what we know, what's going on. So FTX is a major financial player, and they do a little bit of everything, a little bit of the money transmission stuff, a little bit of the market making stuff, a little bit of the trading stuff. And they were led by Sam Brinkman-Fried. And SBF, as we all call him in the industry, was recently going on a tycoon surge. Throughout this year, he made or attempted to make many high-profile acquisitions, like the Voyager acquisition, for example. Now, Sam, on paper, apparently was worth quite a bit of money. He was a decabillionaire, so technically had assets over $10 billion. And the books of his organizations cumulatively were over that much as well. It looks like what's occurred is that FTX was, through a series of transitive relationships, closer to what occurred with Luna than people let on. So Luna, as many of you know, when it collapsed, created a cascading series of failures for things like Three Arrows Capital and others, and it's created an enormous amount of instability in the market that the market is still attempting to digest. There's an asset called Alameda that had a relationship with FTX, and that asset apparently got a bit too much value, and it's created a liquidity problem for Sam's empire. And it may be the case, that, and more will be discovered soon, that he's insolvent and as a result requires a bailout or acquisition, basically a shotgun wedding to continue operations. And if he doesn't get that bailout, that there's a good possibility that his FTX will go out of business. It'll get liquidated. Much in these things tends to get discovered. So Binance has made an offer. They've signed a non-binding letter of intent based upon due diligence. And as due diligence is done, oftentimes things are discovered and uncomfortable things, especially the relationship, financially speaking, of the founders to the entities, as well as how funds were used and how much risk exists within the entities. There is a non-zero probability that the acquisition proposal that Binance has put on the table to bail out FTX, to acquire it, will not succeed because it will fail due diligence. This is often the case in many distressed assets. When people look at them, they discover that they're far more distressed than they thought. If that's the case, because of the size and scale of FTX, it's very likely that that will cascade through the cryptocurrency market. Now, my firm, we had no involvement, exposure, or connection to any of these things, so we didn't lose any money. Cardano doesn't have any dApps or DeFi that really touched anything related to the Luna ecosystem or the yield products that were very popular but highly unstable in the Ethereum ecosystem. So effectively speaking, this does not directly impact the Cardano ecosystem. But as members of the broader cryptocurrency space, this will likely cause issues for all of us. In particular, there is the case that FTX has been lobbying very heavily in Washington, D.C. Their failure could change the political landscape in unpredictable ways. It was my belief that a red wave would occur today, and early indications of the election are that that is the case, with just to the magnitude of it. And based upon that magnitude, it was my belief that legislation would pass that would be inspired from things like the Stab Now proposal from the US Senate, things like the Financial Innovation Act, and so forth. Um, the issues here are that should we see more systemic failures, there could be a belief for more regulatory scrutiny or more draconian laws to be passed to enable that scrutiny. The failure of FTX could result in that, which could in turn more badly damage the industry, and in many cases offshore the American cryptocurrency industry. So this is not a minor event. This could become a very significant event, and it's the last in a series of failures that we saw started by Luna. Luna led to Celsius and other such things, and now we're here. It's just an example of the excesses that I repeatedly warned people about in 2021 and all throughout this year and prior points in my career, like in 2017 with ICO mania. You don't get something for nothing, and extremely high yields tend to evaporate very quickly. And this is no different from that. Just because the asset classes change and because we use new and emerging technology, in no way, shape, or form somehow indemnifies us from the risk that this new technology has. And yet, for some reason, financial engineers, entrepreneurs, and startups seem to think that this time will be different. There is no substitute for hard work. There is no substitute for discipline and every month building and creating utility and getting real adoption. But tech stocks are another example of this. Majority of tech stocks in the United States and abroad are significantly down. In some cases, many are over 90% down, which is quite sad, given that they had enormous valuations just a few months ago in some cases. And so the crypto industry is just a microcosm of a macro trend that we've seen over the last few years of rampant asset inflation. So it's hard to know what's going to happen next. If the Binance acquisition goes through, there is a possibility that the markets could stabilize and that things will look good or at least calm, and we can move on and continue to heal as we were doing before this event. If the acquisition fails, there is a possibility that a series of cascading failures will occur. And because of a lack of transparency, it is very difficult to know how deep these tentacles go. And it's entirely possible that other firms that were reliant upon FTX could also fail, similar to a 2008 financial crisis style event after the fail of Lehman Brothers and the threat of the failure of AIG. So I just wanted to make a video to kind of fill you guys in with what I know, which is currently not much. I'm hearing tons of different rumors and speculations and so forth, but unfortunately we're too far removed from this. But I figured I'd make a video on current affairs and just let you know that things are definitely coming, things are definitely happening, and this is going to be a very transformational week, or at least next 10 days for the cryptocurrency industry. And it's another indication that we need to do things a little differently, and we need to think about things a little differently, both as participants Hopefully the stream is back. I hope everybody see, hope everybody can hear me. Can you guys see me? Can you guys hear me? Okay. Um, the laptop went dead and had to plug it in. It said it had 100% battery, and then suddenly it went to 5% and died. So, as I was saying, we have a situation where cascading failure could occur in the markets. And it's unclear how likely that scenario is. It just is based upon the level of transitivity of connections, leverage, debt, and other factors with FTX, and if FTX gets a bailout or not. Um, Now, this might be isolated to certain asset classes, and it may be isolated to certain financial institutions that trade and deal with crypto. But it certainly, in the short term, could have a significant impact on cryptocurrencies in terms of market stability and predictability. So, a lot of volatility could come. Now, uh, we will know a lot more this week and next week as due diligence is done. And if Binance chooses to go to the next level and go from a non binding to a binding acquisition offer, as well as some more forensic accounting is done on how bad the situation really is at FTX and the level of insolvency they have and how their assets have been moving around and what the accounting tells us. This will likely not be public knowledge for some time, but will probably get exposed either through a bankruptcy process, a class action lawsuit, or an acquisition process, or a regulatory event, or all of those above. From our part, as I've mentioned before, Cardano stayed out of all of this Wild West DeFi as an ecosystem, so there's nothing directly touching FTX. In fact, it's a bit of a dark comedy, but FTX actually refused to list ADA for some reason. So it's not even on that exchange. Okay. But we've witnessed a lot of this year. As I mentioned before, Luna, Celsius, and other ecosystems that have collapsed and created these cascading failures. This happens, especially in emerging markets and especially in global markets. And you just have to deal with them. You take the good and you take the bad. We're still strong. We're still going to wake up tomorrow and do our job and build things. And there's over 100 projects that have launched on Cardano, and they're building and they're strong, and 1,000 more under construction and launching and deploying. So that's very exciting to see. Scott Fest is still going on in just about 10 days. The Switzerland Cardano Summit is still on schedule. There's lots of people who are going to attend. AMAs are still going to happen. Code is still being written. Members-based organizations still under construction. So smooth sailing with respect to project progress, the community development, and the great KPIs that we've been achieving. For example, Cardano is consistently in the top 2 to 3 for NFT issuance and trading. Cardano continues to grow in terms of technology, and there's a lot of great governance improvements and good things to come. I wish we were an island. I truly do, because if we were just to look at Cardano, there would be nothing but optimism, excitement, and enthusiasm. Unfortunately, Cardano lives embedded within a broader industry that is now having to pay back the price of its excesses, the cost of its excesses. And so that will inevitably hit our ecosystem a little bit. If anything, it'll make it more difficult for the projects building on Cardano to get venture capital. It will make it more difficult to get Fortune 500 and government adoption because they're reluctant to adopt cryptocurrency. It'll make it more difficult to navigate the regulatory reality of the cryptocurrency space, which is already very complicated and mercantile. Complicated and mercurial. Very late here, I'm sorry, and I'm very tired. Been up for a long time. So we're just going to wake up every day and keep chipping away at it and keep pushing forward. And I always try to find ways to keep you guys informed with what I know, and also warn you when I see things that are coming that could become problematic. I still do believe cryptocurrencies are here to stay. I think these are very inconvenient and kind of shitty events and circumstances, and we just have to work our way through them together. I remember not too long ago that I made a video when Luna collapsed and mentioned to the community that we could get through it and things are going to be okay. The day of it, it's always tough. And I imagine there's a lot of people that are heavily invested in those ecosystems, FTX and others that are connected to it, that are hurting a lot today. And I am truly sorry that you feel that pain. I wish there's something we could do to help you out. We really can't. The markets have to work their way through. I hope that you can find a way to move on through and realize that the industry itself is still going to be here tomorrow, and that the technology of the industry, the accomplishments of the industry, the things that we're doing are still going to shine bright through all of this in the long term. There's a lot of great and wonderful things happening, and I'm sure that wiser minds will prevail, and the leaders in this industry, especially at the fintech side, will come together, and they'll find ways to ameliorate this situation. Situations like this, as I mentioned, do tend to invite litigation, they tend to invite regulation, and they tend to invite enormous scrutiny. And I suspect that that will be enhanced quite a bit should FTX fail. And let me be clear, the purchase of FTX by Binance is no silver bullet. There are still many things that have to happen in order for this to be completely cleared from the market. And it is not clear the transitive financial relationships between different firms. It is what it is in that respect. So overall, pretty shitty day for crypto, and unfortunately not an unexpected one. The good news is there's not many of these players left, and there's not much of this rampant speculation left in this respect. The after effects, the hangover of 2021 is starting to fade a bit, and I think this might be the bottom, one of the last ones to deal with. It's going to be hard to predict how bad it will be, and it could certainly potentially be very bad, but there's not many more firms that were like FTX or Alameda or like Three Arrows Capital and so forth, at least in this cycle. I truly do hope that this is the last cycle of this nature. I've been through, I think, 7 of them now, and they keep getting more complicated and difficult. And this was really the first one that involved a heavy amount of institutional structuring. When sophisticated financial engineering gets involved, they tend to make fabulous returns, but they also tend to fabulously fuck things up because they're really good at that. And we saw that in 2008, and we've seen that long-term capital management in 1998, the S&L crisis in the early 90s, Black-Scholes crisis in 87. We've seen it a lot. And unfortunately, it entered our space. And when I saw everything get so big in 2021, I realized that at some point that would come to an end. And now we're witnessing that. Now, I don't believe for a moment that crypto's best days are behind it, and we won't see the same economic clout and scale ever come back. It will. In fact, I think we'll eclipse it in the long term. But we have to eclipse it with users, utility, and social significance. We have to eclipse it because the 300 million people who are in the ecosystem are in it because they're doing stuff instead of just speculating. And too many cryptocurrencies floating around, too many instruments floating around, unfortunately, are still living in that rampant era. And that has to stop. And it's now going to, because it'll either run out of money or regulation will crush it. I really hope that wiser minds can prevail. And I really hope that people can realize the tribalism has to stop. I often call for it. And I don't really care what you think about me or say about me, But you do have to understand something, that we actually are all in the same boat, and either we succeed together or fail together. There's no middle ground in this respect. Cryptocurrencies have a small window of time to prove themselves. And I get real sad when these types of things happen, because we could have done better. We should have done better as an industry. And every time one of these things occur, it's a black eye for us all, because consumers, regulators, and everyday people, they don't differentiate the FTXs from the Ethereums, from the Cardanos. They just put everything into one bucket, crypto. And for better or worse, we have to live with the victories and the failures of the industry as a whole. So why then does it make any sense for us to be so tribal and so vicious? So I hope that it's a teachable moment, and I hope that we as an industry leave this stronger, smarter, wiser, and ultimately more collaborative in that respect. So we'll see what the next few days look like, and we'll see if crisis can be averted or it can be exacerbated. As due diligence is done, we'll see as they dig what they discover, and how bad things really are. And certainly a lot of things will be discussed. As I said, on our part, we're just going to show up to work tomorrow and do what we do. Cardano ecosystem, all the people I've talked into it told me the same thing. It doesn't impact us too much. That's why I tweeted the turtle, slow and steady wins the race. It's who we are. And maybe sometimes blindly chasing TVL is not the best idea in the world. Maybe sometimes blindly chasing high yields in these things leads to disaster. Food for thought. I'm going to go get some sleep. Good night, everybody.